When I found out my boss had been stealing $200,000 from the company, I didn't go to HR, I didn't call the police. I did something much worse. I gathered evidence for 3 months, and then I sent it to everyone. I'd been working at a mid-size marketing agency for 4 years. Good job, decent pay. My boss, David, was the CFO, the kind of guy who wore expensive watches and always picked up the tab at company dinners. Everyone loved him. He was charismatic, funny, and had this way of making you feel like you were his favorite person in the room. I was his executive assistant, which meant I had access to his calendar, his emails, and, this is important, the company expense reports. For the first 3 years, everything seemed normal. David traveled a lot for client meetings, which meant a lot of expenses, flights, hotels, client dinners. Standard stuff. I processed his receipts without a second thought. Then one Tuesday in March, I noticed something small. A receipt for a dinner at Nobu in Manhattan, $1,800 for a client dinner. Except I managed David's calendar. He didn't have a client dinner that night. He was supposed to be at his daughter's school play. I almost let it go. People make mistakes with dates on receipts, right? But something made me check the corporate card statement. That $1,800 charge, it was real, and the itemization showed a table for 2, not a client group. That was the thread, and when I pulled it, everything unraveled. I started going back through David's expenses, quietly, after hours, on my own time. I told myself I was just being thorough, making sure there wasn't a simple explanation. There wasn't. In the past 18 months, David had submitted over $200,000 in fraudulent expenses. Fake client dinners, hotels in cities he never visited, flights that were booked and then refunded, except the refunds went to a personal account, not the company card. He had a system. He'd submit legitimate expenses alongside fake ones, burying them in batches so the numbers never looked unusual in any single month. He'd create fake vendor invoices from a company called Meridian Consulting, which I traced to a shell company registered to his brother-in-law. The man was running a mini Ponzi scheme right under everyone's noses, and he was doing it with a smile. I documented everything, screenshots of every fake receipt, side-by-side comparisons of his calendar versus his claimed meetings, the Meridian Consulting invoices, the shell company registration, 3 months of meticulous obsessive evidence gathering. I saved it all to an encrypted folder on my personal laptop. I made 2 backup copies on flash drives. One I kept in my apartment, the other I gave to my sister with instructions to open it if anything happened to me. Maybe that sounds paranoid. But when you're sitting on evidence that could put someone in prison, paranoia is just common sense. Here's where it gets complicated. David was well connected. He played golf with the CEO every Saturday. He'd been with the company since its founding. He was, for all practical purposes, untouchable. If I went to HR, they'd tell the CEO. The CEO would tell David, and I'd be the one looking for a new job, or worse. If I went to the police first, I'd need to explain how I accessed financial records that weren't technically mine to review. My job gave me access to expense reports, not forensic accounting authority. I needed to be strategic. So I waited for the annual shareholder meeting, the one day a year when every board member, every executive, and every major investor was in the same room. 2 weeks before the shareholder meeting, I put in my 2 weeks' notice. David was surprised but not suspicious. I told him I'd gotten a better offer. He took me out for a goodbye lunch and told me I was one of the best assistants he'd ever had. I smiled and thanked him. On my last day, I walked out with a box of personal items and a clear conscience. I was no longer an employee, which meant anything I shared from this point forward was protected under whistleblower statutes. The morning of the shareholder meeting, I sent an anonymous email to every board member, every C-suite executive, and the company's external auditor. The subject line, "Financial irregularities, confidential documentation attached." The email contained everything: the fake receipts, the calendar comparisons, the shell company records, the bank routing information. 200 pages of evidence that painted a clear, undeniable picture. I also sent a copy to the FBI's white-collar crime division, just in case the board decided to handle it internally. I watched it unfold from the outside. A friend who still worked there told me the shareholder meeting turned into an emergency board session. David was escorted from the building by security that afternoon. Within a week, the company hired a forensic accounting firm. Within a month, they'd confirmed everything in my documents and found an additional $80,000 in fraud I'd missed. David was charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. The total theft, $283,000 over 4 years. He pleaded not guilty, which meant a trial. The trial lasted 3 weeks. He was found guilty on all counts. His sentence, 4 years federal prison and full restitution. The company settled with shareholders for the losses. They also quietly paid me a 6-figure whistleblower settlement, which I can't discuss in detail due to an NDA, but let's just say it was more than fair. David's wife divorced him while he was awaiting sentencing. His brother-in-law, the one who ran the shell company, got 18 months. The CEO resigned 6 months later, not because he was involved in the fraud, but because the board lost confidence in his oversight. I started a new job at a company where the CFO doesn't wear a Rolex to the office. I consider that a green flag. If you ever find yourself sitting on something like this, here's my advice. Don't react. Prepare. Document everything. Make copies. Protect yourself legally before you make a move. And when you do make your move, make it count. Karma isn't fast, but it's thorough. If this story hit you, subscribe for more. 3 new karma stories every week, and tell me in the comments. Would you have done the same thing or handled it differently? I want to hear your take. See you in the next one.